episode 23 of the Sweet Nation Show with me and Big Dan from Carlton Banks, Texas. Is that how you pronounce it, Carlton or Carrollton?
Not even Carrollton.
Carrollton, okay.
Carrollton.
In Michigan, a little north of here, there's a town called Carlton, and it's spelled the same way over in the Tri-Cities area. You know that, don't you?
No, I didn't know that.
Yep, spelled the same way. They pronounce it Carlton, like the Carlton dance.
Okay.
All right, today's episode is about Barry Sanders, a guy who a lot of people think is the greatest running back of all time. Some feel he's the best of the 90s or best whatever. So we're going to talk a lot about him today. Another intriguing subject here. Dan, I know you like the Detroit Lions a lot, man. So how about a little intro or a little something about Barry for the people?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like a lot of people from our area or our neck of the woods in Michigan. I'm a Detroit Lions fan for life, and I don't think there's been a more electrifying player or a more beloved player in Detroit in the state of Michigan and, amongst Lions fans than Barry Sanders. I mean, the guy is not only I don't think many would argue that he's the best Lions player ever. And in the argument for the best at his position all time in the NFL. So, we've been lucky to have, two players of that caliber in Detroit, with Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson, who are, two of the greatest players of our team, but not only at their position amongst the NFL. And, Barry Sanders was, the best of the best when it came to the running back position and being an electrifying back. You never knew with Barry Sanders, and every carry could have been a carry to the house, and he was just super electrifying, had all the moves, quickness, cut ability. I've never seen a cut ability in any player like Barry Sanders ever.
I never have either.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're going to spend the afternoon talking about Barry Sanders, and pretty excited to do so.
Yeah, one thing I think about when I think of Barry Sanders is I also always think of Joe Dumars. And the reason why I say that is because I think that when we were growing up into our adult years, we had the two most classiest individuals that have ever played any sport. And they both played their entire careers in Detroit. So I beg for anybody to find anybody more classier in the way they carried themselves than Joe Dumars and Barry Sanders. We had them both at the same time for a lot of years. For some reason, I always think of Joe Dumars. So I guess that's a little shout out to Joey B. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I might throw Steve Yzerman in that conversation as well.
I know. I wasn't trying to leave people out because, you could throw Alan Trammell in there and, but we could go on for days, naming people, but those two are at the top.
Yeah. And nothing was a better example of that is when, Barry Sanders scored touchdowns. He was never a guy, he never danced, he never celebrated. It was a simple hand the ball to the ref. He found the ref, handed the ball. That's the best example of a class from an athlete, especially a football player, that there is, especially, in a time where, guys like to, celebrate first downs or they dance when they get a sack or a simple play. When this guy scored touchdowns, which he scored a lot of, never celebrated. It was even when he broke records, he simply handed the ball to the ref.
Yeah, basically acted like he had done it before, and even when he broke records, he even had like the opportunity to break a couple other records, but he would always let the backup or the third string running back play.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure we'll probably talk about later. So, I know we both have a few questions down, and as always, I'll let you start first and get the first question and / subject out there.
Okay. So my first question is when did you become a fan of Barry first, in college or when he got to the Lions in the NFL?
I wasn't a fan of his in college, but when he was in college, I thought that he was the best college football player I ever seen, and I still feel that way, actually. he's the most explosive. He's the best college player I ever seen. So when he was at OK State, um, I viewed him as the best FBS player ever. But I was such a diehard Michigan fan. I think when I was like in junior high school, I loved Michigan so much. I wouldn't give anybody else credit. Like the way that I would do now, kind of be a little more objective. But he was definitely the best college player I ever seen. But I didn't become a fan, like actual like fanatic, until he was drafted by the Lions.
Yeah. Same here. I didn't really. I'm not gonna say I didn't pay attention to him in college, but I don't remember. I remember him as a Lion, and that's when I became more aware of him. Um, Even though he did amazing things at Oklahoma State. I mean, he played 3 seasons at Oklahoma State from '86 to '88, and the dude just arguably one of the best seasons, college football seasons by any player ever. At his time as Oklahoma State, he amassed 3,797 yards, 52 touchdowns, 6.8 yards a carry.
That's crazy.
Averaged 118 yards a game. His junior season was the season for the ages, where the best season by a college player ever.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
2,850 yards, 42 total touchdowns, record 37 rushing touchdowns, average 7.6 a carry, and 237 yards a game his junior season. It's unreal.
Man, think about at the time that he did that in what was called back then the Southwest Conference, man. I mean, you had Texas, and Texas A&M was a powerhouse. Nebraska. I mean, he was doing it against big time programs.
Yeah.
Oklahoma Sooners.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, like when he was in high school, growing up in Wichita, I can't remember the name of his high school. I think it was called Wichita North High School. I think. His varsity football coach didn't think that he was tough enough to play running back, so he put him at corner. He played corner his sophomore and junior year because the coach didn't think he would make anything as a running back. And then his senior year, they had a different head coach and played the running back position, averaged 10 yards a pop his senior year. I don't remember what his yard total was, but I know he averaged 10 yards a carry as a senior.
That's crazy to think.
And there was another example of his senior year in high school. I seen his head coach say this. I don't remember his name, but he was going for the state rushing record for a single season. And with, I don't know if there was 8, 9, or 10 minutes to go, he asked Barry if he wanted to get back in the game and run some more plays. Let's get that record. And even back then, as a young man, he would rather, the backup or whoever the second string running back was, he thought it was more important for him to play than to break a record. So when he was doing like stuff like that in Detroit, he was actually like that back in Wichita, Kansas as a high school player. Man, I just think that's amazing.
Yeah, to think that's a first down every time you give him the ball.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Average of 10 yards a carry. Every time you hand him the ball, you would bet money on a first down.
10 yards a carry, double-digit yards a carry, man. I've never heard of nothing like that.
No.
I mean, I'm sure if you looked at other like high school numbers, maybe of some big-time players, but still, that's just that's unbelievable. Now, here's another thing, Dan. You might not have known that great season you just talked about, his junior year at Oklahoma State. Now, he was clearly the best player in the country, but there was somebody else that had a good season that year, and rest in peace. He passed on. Derek Thomas. He had 27 sacks that year for Alabama. Yeah. 27 sacks. We're talking. Let me see. 27 sacks. That's the guy was getting two and a half sacks every game the whole year. So, shout out to the late Derek Thomas, man. That was a great year for. And plus in '88, my hate to throw Michigan plug in there. My Michigan Wolverines were good that year too, man. Won a Rose Bowl and beat a good USC team. That was just a good Notre Dame. Notre Dame, they went undefeated, won the national title. They beat us by 1 point in South Bend, but we missed the field goal. But man, that was a great year for college football all around, man.
Yeah, if it wasn't for Barry Sanders, he had 4 300-yard games that season. 4 300-yard games. I believe that's a record.
4 300-yard games.
Yes, 4 300-yard games. Almost half the season, 300-yard games. Yeah.
Oh my, 4?
4.
Wow.
4. Yep. And so if it wasn't for Barry Sanders, we might be talking about, Charles Woodson being the second player ever, a defensive player to win the Heisman Trophy. Because like you said, Derek Thomas had a hell of a season that year and was rightfully overshadowed by Barry
Yeah.
Sanders' record.
Yeah, it took a season like what Barry had for Derek Thomas to not win the Heisman. It took that kind of a season. So
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Obviously won the Heisman Trophy that year.
Yep.
88. Yep.
Yep. He wasn't in New York though. I remember when they announced him as the winner, he was at home, via satellite, and he's like real shy back then and didn't like the big spotlight like that. Yep, he was at home when he got the trophy.
Yeah, I think it plays into like what you were saying. He never wanted the individual accolades. He never wanted the individual spotlight. It was just his personality. He was just a quiet, demeanored type of guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely a 1 in a million, 1 in a million type of player. I think like someone like him, I would compare to like if I was going to compare different sports, I'd probably compare him to someone like Kobe Bryant or like Joe DiMaggio. Like he's in that kind of category, man. Unbelievable.
Now, did you know? Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Did you know? You may know this, but Barry Sanders' dad was a Sooners fan. He was an Oklahoma Sooners fan.
I knew that.
And
Willie Sanders. Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah, and he wanted his son to go to Oklahoma, and Barry chose Oklahoma State. And it was so bad that he always supported his son, but Barry Sanders gave his dad his Heisman Trophy, and his dad won't display it because he's a Sooners fan.
His name is Willie Sanders. I don't know if he's still alive or passed on, because if he's passed on, I really don't want to talk negative about him. But
I'm not sure.
But now that you brought him up, he wasn't even in my thought process till now. What I remember about him, let me see. I do remember him being a lifelong Oklahoma fan because he used to say that all the time. What else? He's always talking about Jim Brown, and I don't have a problem with him thinking Jim Brown's the best. Guy's entitled to his opinion.
Yeah.
But he actually brought Jim Brown's name up at Barry Sanders' Hall of Fame induction, because Willie's the one that inducted Barry. He was talking about Jim Brown at the podium. What else? What else about him? I remember him saying that that when the Sooners played the Oklahoma State Cowboys, he cheered for the Sooners, even when his son played for the Cowboys. I mean, he says that all the time. I haven't seen him in a while, man. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if he's still here. If he is, God rest him. I don't know. But another thing, I remember his Barry's mother, Shirley Sanders. Barry is just like the way she is. She's very quiet, very nice. Every time she speaks, you could just tell she's a sweet lady. And Barry, as far as like his characteristic traits, I think he takes after her.
Yeah.
But now the thing about Willie, though, I'm gonna end it on this. He instilled work ethic in Barry, as far as like training and working hard when he was a kid. Even like used to have him like doing construction, helping him with construction type stuff when he was a teenager. He instilled a lot of work ethic in him and made a man out of him. So I'm gonna end that on Willie Sanders.
So I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't see it in a negative light. What he did. He was a fan of Oklahoma. And I'll pose a question to you like this: what if your son went to play football for Ohio State? Are you going to wear a scarlet Ascencio Ohio State jersey? Or you know what I mean? Are you going to show up to a game and wear that Ohio State jersey? Or are you going to show up to
my son played there? Yeah. If my
really?
son played, it would. Yeah. Only if it was my son, though. If
Wow.
it was my son playing, I would have. Yeah, I would. I would have to. I mean, Glenn Robinson, wore Michigan gear when his Glenn Robinson III played at Michigan. Jim Hardaway had the Scully, in the stands all the time.
Yeah.
I would have to, man. I can't go against my son, man.
Man, I don't know how I would be.
We're talking about your son here.
I know, and I don't know how some people, their fandom and their loyalty runs so deep. I told my daughter Sydney, she was many years ago, she was thinking about being she wanted to go to veterinary school, and Lansing, has a good
Mm-hmm.
veterinary school, and she was looking at schools, and I was like, well, can't we find a different school for you to go to? Does it have to be Michigan State? Like, she's like, well, what if I cheered for Michigan State? And I was like, well, I'll come support you, but I'll be wearing a Michigan hoodie. I'm not gonna put on no green and white. You know what I mean? I told her I'd rather go out of state for school than go to MSU.
But what if she was a starting point guard for the Spartans?
I would support her, but I would never put on the colors. I would go to games to support her, but I wouldn't show up in my colors. I would wear something but I would support her. I just would never put on the colors.
Yeah, I never really looked at it that way before, man. But I have to be honest. If my son or grandson played for Ohio State, I would be wearing the scarlet. I would have to, man. I'd have to. I got to get behind them. I want them to be the best that they can be, and my support, I think, would be very important to them, man. I'm trying to mold my granddaughter AJ to be something, and
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully, God, hopefully I don't come across that crossroad where she wants to go to state. But as far as like the veterinarian program you were talking about with was it Sydney?
Sydney. Yeah, Sydney. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think they had the best veterinary program in the country, if I'm not mistaken. Spartan.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, yeah, I'd have if it. Anybody else? No. Like the Flintstones when they played Florida. Man, I wore a Florida hat during that game, man. I didn't even cheer for them, man, at all. And I was supposed to be like a big Flint guy.
Right.
Okay.
All right, back to Barry.
All right, back to Barry. Now, let me see. It's kind of a question. My first topic here. I kind of got just like Detroit Lions of the 1990s. It's basically about. I mean, obviously, if we talk about Detroit in the 1990s, we're going to be talking about Barry most of the time. And my question is how like exciting was the Detroit Lions for you personally in the 1990s, especially like with Barry Sanders? How exciting was that decade watching them play the Silverdome?
I mean, like I said at the top, they're the NFL. I mean, one can argue that Barry Sanders is one of the most exciting players to watch ever in the NFL, not only a Detroit Lion. So watching Lions games in the 90s and watching Barry Sanders on the field was just you were lucky, I think, if you got to see that. I was lucky enough to see one series of Barry Sanders live. My uncle had got us tickets to a preseason game, and we were headed down there, and him and his buddies made us late to the game, and I'm like getting pissed off because it's like it's a preseason game. Barry's only going to play the first quarter. Let's stop fucking around and get to the game so I can see Barry Sanders. You know what I mean? And we were late, and I got to see one series of Barry Sanders on the field, and it wasn't. You wanted more when you went to games and to see Barry Sanders live. I mean, it was special enough to see what he did on TV. But if you got to see it live, I mean, that's a special thing amongst any sport when it comes to any player like that. But I mean, every time he touched the ball, it was like you paid attention to see what he was going to do.
Yeah. He's one of those guys, kind of like the way like Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan was, man. He was one of those guys that every game that he played in, he was going to do at the very least one thing that you've never seen before or would like stick in your mind for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Did I hear you correctly? You only seen him live once?
That was the only time I seen him live. One series.
Wow.
Yeah.
That I didn't. Wow. I thought that I would have thought you'd went to quite a few games back then.
As a kid, my family, didn't have a ton of money, so I didn't get to go to many, um, well, at least Lions games. My dad was more of a baseball guy, so we saw several Tigers games. I remember seeing, going to Tigers games at Old Tiger Stadium and
Yeah.
Comerica Park. But um, my dad was a football fan, but for some reason he never. Maybe tickets were more expensive, or I don't know, but just never got the opportunity to go to many Lions games. And I only went to that game because it was my uncle that bought tickets and he invited me to go. And it was because it was a preseason game, so it's probably pretty cheap.
Wow. What was some of your more like memorable moments of those Lions of the '90s? Any like particular games or plays stick out?
Well, my I guess my most memorable game was I think it was the '97 playoff game against the Cowboys. If
That
I'm
was the '91 season.
was it '91? Why did I say '97?
Talking about when they won the game that they won.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was
the big highlight is
the thumbs up year. That was when Mike Utley broke his neck. So it would have been like January of '92, but it was a '91 season.
yeah, this was a playoff game. I could have, or maybe I looked up wrong. Maybe I thought I could have sworn it was '97, or maybe it was early. But yeah, that playoff game against the Cowboys, where you see the highlight, and he's like ducking behind players, and players are turning around, they can't find
Yeah,
him, and
yeah, that was Tony Casillas that was turned
yeah,
around. Yeah,
yeah, that's probably my most memorable game of Barry Sanders. And then there was a game where he uh, he had broken a record, and he scored a touchdown in the end zone, and like all the players came and gave him hugs. And again, Barry Sanders doesn't celebrate in any way. He just hands the ball off and just stands there while the rest of his teammates crowd around him and give him hugs, and they're all celebrating, and he's just, okay guys, okay, and next play. And so there was so many games that Barry Sanders had. Another one is that I believe it was against the Bears, where he ran into that pile, and you think
yeah,
he's buried in the pile, and then boop, he pops out, and
yeah.
just everybody's in the pile. So you just see this Barry just hook around, and down the field he goes, and he's gone.
How did he? How did he do all that stuff, man?
He's a special talent. The guy's quickness. I mean, the dude had legs, tree trunks for legs. He was so
Yeah,
low to the ground. Every defensive player that you talk to usually say Barry Sanders like the toughest guy to tackle ever. You couldn't touch him. The first guy never put a hand on Barry Sanders. I think I've heard several defensive players of his time say you didn't want to be the first guy there because you were missing. Like you were not going to be the first guy to Barry Sanders and put a hand on.
right. Michael Strahan said that the highlight of his career was not winning a Super Bowl. He said the highlight of his career was the time that he tackled Barry Sanders by himself with no help.
Yeah. Yep.
He said that was the highlight of his career.
But he was
I
just
can't.
special.
I
He
don't.
was
I don't know, man. I never
he was
seen nothing like it.
he was like that, like Michael Jordan. Like you saw him play, and you didn't know any given game he could. Like any given game, Michael could go off for 50 or 55 points. Any given game, Barry could bust off like 200-300 yards and 4 touchdowns. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah. Did you like Wayne Fonts?
I did. I think Wayne Fonts is one of the best, the better coaches the Lions have had. I think he got my words are escaping me. I think he got a bad deal. Like he was a good coach. I think it was the system they were running, and I think the GM or the ownership at the time, and just he had the pieces. It was just I don't know what it was. You could argue that Wayne Fonts' tenure, as far as playoff appearances and records and things like that might have been one of the best eras or periods in Lions football. Jim Caldwell had some success, some winning seasons. So I think those two guys are probably top of the list as far as when you think of Lions coaches.
Yeah, I was a big fan of Wayne. I love Wayne Fonts, man. That smile. Every player that played for the Lions when he was there, they said he's the ultimate players coach. You want to play hard for him, win for him. I remember when he got there. I can't remember what season it was. I don't know. I think it was '88. He got there like in the middle of the season or towards the end, because I think it was Monty Clark that got fired. It was either Clark or there was somebody in between Clark and Fonts. I can't remember, but the Lions were 4-8 when they made a change in 1988, and Wayne Fonts took over as the interim coach for the rest of the year. They won their last 4 games. They were 8-8. Then they drafted Barry. Now, although Wayne Fonts didn't have a whole lot of playoff success, obviously, only won 1 game in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
At least they were in the playoffs a lot more often than they weren't.
Yeah,
I loved Wayne Fonts, man. One of my favorite coaches ever, man. Him and Sparky Anderson, Chuck Daly, Shem Beckler, Bill Frieder. I just, man, I don't have a bad thing to say about Wayne Fonts. I loved him when he was here.
yeah. I think back then, because back then they ran the the run and shoot or run and gun offense.
Yeah, the run and shoot. Yep.
They deployed like 3 or 4 wide receivers and Barry Sanders alone in the backfield. I think if they would have ran more pro style offense and obviously put a fullback behind Barry, they would have done a lot better, because I don't think as good as Rodney Peete was, I don't think the Lions had really great quarterback play from at that position for a long time. As we see it now, Matthew Stafford is the best quarterback to come around to wear a Lions jersey in quite a long time. Rodney Peete wasn't a terrible quarterback, but I don't think they had the quarterback quality to really truly maximize that run and shoot offense. You saw that when they drafted Andre Ware from Houston, and because he ran that system in college, but just didn't quite pan out in the pros. Wasn't what they hoped for.
Forgot all about the run and shoot. Back in those days, there was only 3 teams in the NFL that ran the run and shoot. It was the Lions, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Houston Oilers. Those were the only teams that ran the run and shoot.
Yeah.
That was I think Mouse Davis was our coordinator at the time. Mouse Davis.
And was it? I know Warren Moon was the quarterback for the Oilers.
Yeah.
And was it Jeff George that was the quarterback for Atlanta? It was before he went to Indy.
I believe it was. Yeah, it was Jeff George. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Brett Favre was like a 4th string running back on that Falcons team. Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, it was Jeff George. George was before Chris Miller, I think. Yeah. Yep. It sure was. That Jared Glanville coached Atlanta at the time.
Yep.
You remember Glanville?
Yep. I remember him. But yeah, I mean, if they would have ran a different type of offense, I think they had more success. I think they would have had the ability to maybe beat that, Washington team that just destroyed us in the playoffs. But yeah.
I watched that game. Me and my cousin Tony watched that game on the screen at the Silverdome.
Yeah.
They had fans in there. Yeah, we watched that game on the screen. We got demolished by that Washington team. But I'm glad you brought that up, man. That's one of the greatest single season teams of all time. That Washington Redskins '91 team.
Yep.
They only lost 2 games. They only lost 2 games that year.
Mark Rippon.
They had a really good year. They started the season like 9-0 or 10-0.
Yeah.
Mark Rippon was their quarterback.
Rippon, Art Monk, Darryl Green was on that team.
Yep. I think Ricky Sanders, I think, was still there. Joe Gibbs coaching them. They had good players.
Yep.
Henry Ellard, I think Henry Ellard was there too. But that's who they lost to. They gave it a good run, man. That was the Mike Utley season, 1991.
Yeah, Barry Sanders in Detroit. Go over some of his numbers. Total 15,269 yards total. Again, 5 yards per carry. We talked about yards per carry before. At any level in football, if you're 5 or over yards per carry, that's good. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's real good.
Yeah, that's like batting 300 in baseball. You know what I mean? So when you talk about in high school, he averaged 10 yards a carry and then averaged over 6 in college. It's just crazy what he did. 99 total touchdowns, 1,000 yards every season he played. Not a single season under 1,000 yards.
Unreal.
Unreal. 10 times a Pro Bowler, 6 times first All-Pro, first team All-Pro, 2 Offensive Player of the Years, 1 MVP, which he shared with Brett Favre.
Yeah.
4 rushing titles, and he, the guy has a slew of records. Tied with Walter Payton for most 1,100-yard seasons, most 1,400-yard seasons, most 1,500-yard seasons. 25 games of 150 yards or more. It's amongst other. There's just too many records to name that he still owns.
He still owns a lot of those records?
Yeah.
Wow.
He still owns or is tied with Walter Payton for some of these records. I think there's one record. He's second behind Jim Brown, and I think that's yards per carry. I think Jim Brown has 5.2 yards a carry, and Barry has 5 yards a carry for his career.
I thought it was Barry and Bo Jackson. I thought were the only 2 players that had a career average of 5. I thought Bo Jackson was okay. It might be Jim Brown.
Oh, am I? Well, I'm going to have to go back and fact check it, but yeah,
I'm not sure. You might be right.
Yeah, I thought
one of those years. Now, how about this? I think it was the 97 year. Now, the 97 year was the year that he got the 2,052 yards, where he was co-MVP.
Yeah.
Now, that same season, and I'm pretty sure it was the same season. It was either that season or the season after when Bobby Ross took over. But I believe that year that he got 2052, his first 2 weeks, he had a total of 53 yards. So he basically got 2,000 yards for 14 weeks. Now, had he had 100, let's say 120, 130, he would have demolished Eric Dickerson's single season record.
Yeah, because I think he only fell shy of that, less than 100 yards. He was less than 100 yards from that single season record.
53. If he would have had 53 more yards, he would have tied it, and 54 would have broke the record.
Yeah, and now correct me if I'm wrong, because I think I remember during that season, I think he had a chance to go back in a game late in the season to try to break that record, and he said no. He didn't want to go back in the game. And now somebody correct me if I'm wrong in the comments or give us some feedback, but if I'm not mistaken, there was a game late, it may have been the last game of the season that year, where he had an opportunity to go back in and get some more yards, and I think they were winning, they were up, and he said no, and he let the backup play.
He did that a couple times when the rushing title was on the line.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
One of those games I think was at the Seattle Kingdom, but he did have a couple instances. I remember Ron Rivers was one of the guys that played the fourth quarter, but as far as the 2,000 yards, breaking Dickerson's record, that was the last game of the season against the New York Jets at the Dome. But but you were right though. You were on the right path. That was because when you said 4 rushing titles, I was going to say he could have had 6, but if he was selfish, he could have had 6. But Barry's Barry.
Right. I think. Let me double check here. I want to say he's 4th all time. Yep, 4th all time as far as single season rushing yards, and it's obviously Eric Dickerson with 2105, Adrian Peterson 2097, and then Jamal Lewis with 2066. So he was, it was 60, 45, 40, like 50 some yards shy that year.
Yeah, I think he was close, but he went for it. He went for it. Now, my one of my more memorable Barry Sanders moments, because this is like not like him, it's not kind of out of character, but it was cool though. It was in a good way, not a bad way.
And that was, I don't mean to cut you off, that was my very next question to you. What was your favorite game or moment of Barry Sanders' career?
Okay, I'll first I'm gonna do moment. I've only seen the highlight. I don't remember what game it was because it's not really, they don't show the game, they just show him. There's it's a play. I can't. It might have been when the division title was on the line, like at the end of the season. They were probably playing like Green Bay or something. Man, the division title was on the line. I remember they were playing at the Dome. They took a lead, and then it was kind of apparent that the game was over. And they kind of show Barry like on the sidelines, and he's sitting on the bench, but he's kind of sitting on top of the bench, drinking out of that green Gatorade cup, having some water. And there was like, I don't know, somebody for the Lions, like late in the game. It was like a rookie or something like that. They don't show the play. They only show Barry on the sidelines. He like gets an interception and takes it back. And you see Barry doing this, like, woo, happy for him. You know what I mean? That was cool. I just remember seeing that. I just thought that was cool that he really cared for his younger players like that, man.
Yeah, he celebrated for his teammates, but he never celebrated for himself.
Right. Now, what was the other question, Dan?
Just favorite moment or game.
Favorite moment or game?
So you said moment. So what would be your favorite game that you've seen Barry Sanders play? Like, is a game that stand out?
It would have to be that New York Jets game when he was going for Dickerson's record. Well, I don't know going into that game if we were more so looking. I think we were more so looking forward to him getting 2,000 yards. So I would have to say, like the buzz I felt for that game, especially with him with the 2,000 on the line. There was let me see. There was a point in the game where he had 2,000 yards exactly. And then like a couple plays later, he broke one for like 52 yards. And those are like his last yards of the game. So that had to have been my probably my most memorable Barry Sanders game. Another memorable moment that kind of sticks out, and that was 1995. Scott Mitchell, I think, was our quarterback back then. I think. I remember after 9 games, our record was 2-7 after 9 games, and the last 7 weeks they went on a 7-game winning streak, got in the playoffs, and Barry played outstanding in that 7-game winning streak. I remember the last game of the year, regular season, was at Tampa Bay at the Big Sombrero.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching that game at Jolly O's. Our playoff spot was on the line. We won that game. I just remember, I don't really know what his numbers were in that 7-game winning streak. I just remember the way that he played and the way that our team came together. So I guess I'm kind of answering more like a Detroit Lions moment. That was my favorite moment, supporting those guys, watching them go on that 7-game winning streak after they were 2-7, making the playoffs, giving the fans something to cheer about. That was my most, other than the 2,000 yard. I think, let me see, he only became the 3rd player in history on that day because only O.J. Simpson and Dickerson had done that. But so I would have to say the game against the Jets, where he got the 52 yards for the season, and the 7-game winning streak that they ended with in 1995. That was probably like being an NFL football fan. Even I was a big Raider fan growing up, but I liked Spielman and Barry Sanders and all them guys. That was my most favorite. That was my most. I'll go to my grave, man, saying that was my most fun time being a Lions fan back then. Even though they didn't win anything, but they were still exciting.
So what was your thoughts or feelings about Barry not tying but sharing the MVP in '94 with Brett Favre? Do you think what are your thoughts? And before you answer, I was just looking up Brett Favre's numbers that year in '94. Dude had 3,800 yards, 33 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 90.7 rating. So, I mean, what do you think? Should he have shared that, or should have been Barry's alone or Brett's alone?
Um, I I would have to say that Barry Sanders should have had it alone because that season and that little time frame, there was it wasn't even close. There was no player that was more valuable to their team than he was because I mean you're talking about like you're a Barry Sanders injury away from your team going 3-13. I in 1997, 2,152 yards. You're clearly on a bad offensive line. You're clearly the best player in the league. Not a bad. No, actually, they weren't a bad offensive line. People compare them to the Cowboys all the time, and that's like the greatest offensive line of all time. When Nate Newton, Eric Williams, and all them.
Yeah.
But the Lions actually had a decent offensive line. Like Lomas Brown was a Pro Bowler. Kevin Glover was a Pro Bowler. Um, in '97, for him to have that many yards and had to earn every single one of those yards, clearly the best player in football that year, I think.
Yeah, and I think I mean you see it more nowadays too, or where it's the MVP is a quarterback award, but back then, you saw a few other players get the award. It wasn't always giving it to a quarterback. It was probably majorly giving it to the quarterback, but not always. But yeah, I think the difference in those positions is the quarterback can affect play of other players more than a running back can. You hear it all the time about quarterbacks make other players better. Like the Brett Favre's, the Peyton Mannings, the Dan Marinos. They make other players better. If you have good talent at a quarterback position, you don't have to have superstar receivers because they can get them the ball in a more effective way. Now it was kind of the opposite with the Lions where we didn't have the best quarterback play. We had some good receivers, Herman Moore, Brett Perriman, but we didn't have a great quarterback. So, yeah, you could argue that without Barry on that team, teams are allowed to just focus on the pass, and the Lions didn't have a running game if Barry Sanders wasn't on the field. So, yeah, there should have been no contest as far as who was the more valuable player to their team that
Yeah.
year.
And I don't want to take anything away from Brett Favre because he's a top 10 quarterback of all time, in my opinion.
Absolutely. But it was more common for a quarterback to have those kinds of numbers than a running back to have the kind of numbers Barry did that year.
It's usually like that. It's like that in college too. Like the Heisman Trophy usually goes to a quarterback. But Brett Favre, he may have been the MVP of the league, but there's just nobody that, in the '90s that was more valuable to their team than Barry Sanders. The only player that was more valuable to their team would be Michael Jordan in the '90s. That's it. Other than that, but no one was more valuable to their team than Barry Sanders.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I mean, co-MVP, man. Of course, I'm gonna give the nod. I'm gonna give the when a running back is putting up astronomical numbers and a quarterback puts up astronomical numbers. I mean, more often than not, if I was a voter, man, I would probably give it to the guy that's taking all the punishment.
Yeah.
It's just me, though.
Yeah.
I would more stick up for a running back than I would a quarterback.
Absolutely. So Barry Sanders on July 27th, 1999, just a month away from training camp, or not training camp, or the preseason, Barry hangs him up. He retires. Now, I don't know if you want to add more detail to the story, but rumor was he was frustrated with the offense, frustrated with the coach at the time. Remind me who that was. I can't. It was that
Bobby Ross.
Bobby Ross. Okay, that's what I thought. They wouldn't give him a fullback. They wouldn't change the offense. They wouldn't.
Barry didn't want a fullback.
Well, I thought, okay, maybe I thought it was something to do with the offense. He didn't like Ross's.
Coach Ross wanted to have a fullback, but
Barry did want to.
Barry kind of felt like a fullback was. He didn't say it in these words, but he kind of felt like it was more just taking up space.
Yeah.
And didn't need him there.
But he retired, and it shocked all of us. It shocked the world. I remember, I believe I was driving in a car with my buddy Jim Valite. I think we were headed to Chicago. He was moving to Chicago, and I drove down there with him, and we were in the car, and I believe we heard it on the radio. It came over the radio. Barry Sanders retired, and we just looked at each other like, what the fuck just happened?
You want to know what I thought when I heard about that?
Yeah, that was my next question. Do you remember where you were, and what were your thoughts, and what was going through your mind, and what was your reaction when you heard the news?
Jackie and I were living at Windsor Place Apartments at the time, and I remember I was in my living room when I heard the news. I can't remember if somebody called me on the phone or if I saw it on SportsCenter, but I was in my living room in Windsor Place. A couple things crossed my mind when I heard that. Number one, I thought the Lions are going to suck for a while, obviously. Number two, I think Bobby Ross, because Bobby Ross brings like a military background with him wherever he goes. He was like that at the University of Maryland. He's like a military person. He basically told everybody on that team, Barry included, that everybody is to report to training camp. No exception rule or whatever in that. Now, generally in the NFL, and it's still like this today, if I'm not mistaken, the superstars don't go to training camp. They just don't. It's not, it's usually not a big deal, but like guys like Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Barry Sanders, Deion Sanders, Joe Montana, guys like Dan Reed, guys like that don't have to go to train. They really don't have to go to, it's not like a mandatory thing to go to training camp. Bobby Ross said everybody's coming. That was one of the turning points. I know Barry wasn't a fan of having a fullback in front of him. So that's what I thought of that situation. And another thing I thought was, I think everybody else thought this too, was now fucking Emmitt Smith is going to be the one that's going to break Walter Payton's rushing record now. So we're going to have to deal with that.
That's exactly what went through every Lions fan's mind is now we got to deal with Emmitt Smith, and it was because it was the competition between Barry Sanders and Emmitt Smith, and you're like, okay, now he's going to retire, so Emmitt's going to continue, and Emmitt's going to get the record, and Emmitt's going to be looked at as the better running back, and there's no question if Barry Sanders would have, played a few more years or as many years as Emmitt did, that record, the all-time rushing record would be untouchable at this point.
Untouchable. I'll tip my hat to Emmitt Smith though, even though he did have a great offensive line, we know that, but he was a good downhill north and south running back. He knew how to hit the holes. He was a good pro running back. He was an okay college running back at Florida. I thought Eric Rhett was better when they played together, but he was he played with a dislocated shoulder in the playoffs once, which I'll give credit to. Having dislocated both of my shoulders in high school, so I know what that pain feels like. And Emmitt has said that he said basically what you just said. He said no doubt. He said Barry would have annihilated the record had he played into his mid-30s, and it would be an untouchable record. But yeah, that's basically what I thought when I heard that he retired, and I knew because Barry had been with us for like 10 years now, been a part of our lives for 10 years. So we know someone like him, if he says he's retiring, that means that he's retiring. No one's going to talk him out of it, and he's never playing football again. We know that that's final.
So let me ask you this. Do you think we got kind of a curse of the Bambino thing going on with the Lions? They forced Barry into retirement, so now we're cursed. Now we're just stuck with that curse because we let one of the greatest players in NFL history retire because of frustration with the team?
That's a good question. You got to remember this curse goes way before Barry Sanders, because since 1957, okay, think about that, Dan. That's almost 70 years ago.
Yeah.
Since 1957. The Detroit Lions have only won one playoff football game, and that's it. That's that 91 game against the Cowboys we were talking about earlier.
Yep.
They have not won a playoff game since 1957. We're talking about 63 years ago, the AFL days, AFL, NFL days, whatever.
Yep.
They have not won in the playoffs except for one game since 1957. So this goes like 31, 32 years before we drafted Barry. So
Yeah.
it is the curse of a Bambino, but I don't know why Detroit has been so cursed, though, to not being able to win a playoff game. Like, okay, like, look, you like the Dolphins, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's let me see, it's 2020, it's year 2020.
Mm-hmm.
What are the odds? Let's say that they're going to be an NFL franchise for 100 more years. What are the odds that from now, 2020 to 2090, that they won't win a single not one playoff game? What are the odds? Or no. What are the odds that they're only going to win one playoff game from now to 2090?
Yeah, that's pretty some insurmountable odds. That's some pretty big odds
That is
would
I mean, people always talk about the Chicago Cubs curse, and they talk about Boston, like you said, the curse of the Bambino for a while. Yeah. I don't know why the Lions have been so cursed.
Well, the one win did come in the Barry Sanders era. So,
yeah,
although they weren't making the playoffs every year or anything like that, but that's when that one win did come. So,
and not only did they win a playoff game, but they beat a team that ended up a dynasty. That's the Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin, Alvin Harper Cowboys they beat. That is a form of a curse.
Making a bad situation worse.
Yeah. Okay, are you ready for this next question? Because I've been waiting to ask this one.
Okay.
This is something I've always been interested in, man. Okay. NFL football and the NBA. NBA, it's all about rings. Always about rings. When you talk about the great players, you often hear, well, he don't have a ring. When you talk about Ewing, Stockton, Malone, and Barkley, well, they don't have no rings.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan's got 6 rings. It's all about the ring. He got more rings. He's better than Larry Bird. Got more rings. He's got more rings than Isaiah. You hear rings all the time in the NBA.
Okay.
Now in the NFL, a lot of people, I think most people think Barry Sanders is the greatest running back of all time, and there'd be a few people that will probably think he's the best football player that they've ever seen. Now, how come not having championship rings? How come he doesn't get that treatment like a Stockton, a Malone, a Barkley, and a Karl Malone, and a Patrick Ewing?
Well, I think you'll be surprised, like, almost kind of like we did with other shows. I have a couple sources here where we're going to talk about the top 5 rankings, and I think you'll be surprised by some of them. But yes, I think it's because in the NBA, there's less players on the field of play, right? You got 5 guys on the basketball court, right? So one player can more easily have control of the outcome, a la Michael Jordan, right? Nobody took over a game and carried teams like Michael Jordan did.
Okay.
Sort of. You could argue, Kareem, whatever. In football, there's 22 guys on the field. You know what I mean? It's less, and now I will give you the quarterback and running back are probably the 2 positions where you can say a dominant player could more affect the outcome of the game, but there's just so many other players on the field to play. I think it's harder for, unless you're talking to a quarterback, it's harder for you to associate championships with individual play, right? So
yeah.
players like, running backs that have these career seasons, I think championships don't play as much of a factor because it's much harder for one guy on a football team to control the outcome than one guy on a 5-man basketball team. You know what I mean? So especially in basketball, when you talk about players up at the top, when they're all really great, you talk about the top 5 in scoring, top 10 in scoring, or whatever it is. There are guys like Malone and Barkley that kind of drop on that list when you're talking about the best ever because they don't have rings, because I think their play is so close, and their numbers are so high that championships is what pushes them over the top. Whereas in football, I get a little frustrated with this, or I just had a Twitter conversation with somebody about, talking about Matthew Stafford and talking about Matthew Stafford has so many wins with the Lions. And I was like, well, why does wins automatically get associated with the quarterback position? There's 22 guys on the team. You know what I mean? A great quarterback on a shitty team, he's not a good player because the ownership can't put a good team around him. You know what I mean? So a lot of times in football, it was Tom Brady for a while, until he really solidified himself. A lot of people was like, I don't care that he has 3 championships or 4 championships or 5 championships. These other players are better players at that position than him. So I think it's just the separation or the ratio of players, I think, has a lot to do with it.
6 championships Brady has.
Well, no, I'm saying as people talk, as the more championships he got,
Okay.
not until he got 6. I think a lot of people, once he hit 6, they're like, okay, his championships have now boosted his stats so much that there's no question, right? But when Brady only had 3, there was still an argument there about, is Brady better than Dan Marino? Is Brady better than John Elway or Brett Favre? You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying. Their numbers are so close. People gave the edge to other players because, yeah, he has a couple championships, but this guy's numbers are so ridiculous. But now when he got to 6, that bolstered him, to the top of the list. So in basketball, if there's one guy in a 5-man team and the league leaders all time have such great numbers that, that you have to go to championships to kind of put yourself to the front of the line. In football, there's a lot more guys on the field. So individual records are kind of not, or are taken more into account than championships. That's my theory.
Well, yeah. Well, you feel the way you feel about the win-loss quarterback record. I feel the way I feel about the championship thing because in any sport, like Oscar Robertson said, either you can play or you can't. He said, I don't want to hear about legacy and all this dynasty crap. You can either play or you can't. Because, I don't think Tony Parker is better than Allen Iverson. That's just my opinion. Opinion.
And the argument.
And Tony Parker is great, but I don't think he's better than Allen Iverson.
Yeah, and the point I'm always going to bring up, or the example I'm always going to bring up, is who's a better quarterback, Dan Marino or Trent Dilfer? One has a ring and one doesn't.
Oh, I know. Yeah, you can give a whole bunch of analogies like that. Who is Zaza Pachulia better than Karl Malone?
Right.
You give a million examples like that.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, championships aren't everything.
Well, you're agreeing with me then on the ring thing because all you hear in the NBA, man, is it's all about the rings. He got more rings. Like Draymond Green actually believes he's a better player than Charles Barkley.
Well, Draymond Green's an idiot.
Mr. What's his new nickname now? They call him Mr. Triple Single.
But no,
he's a better player than Barkley was.
I'm agreeing with you, but I'm also, I don't know if I'm disagreeing with you because, like I said, in the NBA, you can talk about championships because the guys at the top have such similar numbers as far as scoring and career points and all this kind of stuff that it takes championships to move players above other players. In football, it's not that way because there's so many other players on the field of play affecting the outcome of games. Does that make sense? So it's a lot, you're not going to see, besides the Patriots, we don't see teams like the Bulls winning 6 championships and going on multiple three-peats. We don't see that in the NFL, besides the Patriots and the remarkable thing that they did. The only, the Buffalo Bills got to 4 Super Bowls in a row. I think was it the Dallas Cowboys is I think they're the last team to win back-to-back championships.
Patriots won back-to-back in the early 2000s. They beat the Rams.
Oh,
yeah. They beat the Carolina Panthers the next year.
Yeah. So, you know what I mean? It's not as easy to do it in football as it is in basketball. Those kinds of things.
Now, what if Peyton Manning had all them wins. And what if like Peyton Manning was all-time wins leader? Would you still say that about? Well, there's 20 other people on the field. Like when you say that, sometimes I think that's like an subliminal, like Peyton Manning sticking up for Peyton Manning because
Well,
you loved him so much.
that's what I'm saying. I think I don't look as championships as strongly in the NFL as you would in the NBA because, like you said, Peyton Manning and guys like Peyton Manning, John Elway, Dan Marino, there's Jim Kelly. They're great quarterbacks, but their team couldn't get it done. So, if Peyton Manning was the all-time leader in wins, versus Brady, where he's at with 6 championships. I mean, I think you still, at that point, you give the edge to Brady, of course, but I'm sure there'll still be some people that argue for Manning, because the quarterback can elevate the play of others, unlike any other position in any other sport.
Okay. I was thinking of something. There was a player we forgot to give a shout out to earlier. I'm disappointed in both of us, actually. We didn't mention Thurman Thomas playing with Barry at Oklahoma State, man. We didn't mention Thurman Thomas.
Forgot all about that.
You know what? I'm gonna just touch on that just for a quick second. I know we're almost done here. Barry Switzer, when he was coaching at Oklahoma, I heard this a long time ago. This is when Barry and Thurman were both playing at OK State. Now Thurman was 2 classes higher than Barry was, and Thurman Thomas's senior year, Barry Switzer told his team, "Don't injure Thurman Thomas." Basically saying, right. Because Barry Switzer knew who Barry Sanders was, like when he was a freshman, sophomore, whatever, or like in high school, whatever.
Yeah.
He told his defense to not injure Thomas.
Yeah, like we don't want that other guy in the game. Let's stick with the starter.
Yeah. I'm more disappointed in myself for not mentioning Thurman Thomas because he's one of my favorite players of all time. I really I like those Buffalo Bills teams, even though they lost 4 in a row. I like those teams a lot. So man, I'm disappointed in myself for not mentioning them.
Yeah, Thurman Thomas had a great career in the NFL and one of the best all-time running backs in the NFL as well.
Yep. So you said you wanted to rate these guys, or what did you want to do next?
So that's the final thing we'll do is we'll give your list. Who's your top 5 running backs? And I don't know. I think you went first last time, so you want me to go first this time?
You want me to name 5?
Yeah, you should be able to name 5. You should be able to name your top 5 running backs all time.
I think usually when I rate my running backs, I think I usually only do 3, but I'll do 5 this time. Go ahead.
So my list, I have Walter Payton at number 1.
Okay.
Barry Sanders, number 2. Well, Walter Payton I put number 1 because, I mean, I just think he's probably the best combination of power and grace that a running back has ever had. And he could run through you, but he could go around you and over top of you just as well. Barry Sanders, number 2, obviously. Jim Brown. You talk about a guy that just want to truck people. That guy was just running over people. Was just a beast, and shortened career for Jim Brown too. Not a real long career.
Right.
Number 4, I have Emmitt Smith, and there's other running backs I kind of wanted to put it there, but I had to give it to him because he does own the all-time rushing record. And then at number 5, I have a tie. I couldn't decide which one of these guys I wanted to put in 5, so I put him as a tie there, and that's LaDainian Tomlinson and Adrian Peterson.
Okay. I had to write 2 extra names down here because I usually have top 3.
Okay.
Mine may surprise you a little bit because I only and these aren't hard picks or nothing like that, but I don't have Emmitt Smith in my top 5 individual running backs. I don't.
Okay.
I'm not trying to slight him, but
it's not out of the norm. I found doing some research. I found some lists a few lists that didn't have Emmitt Smith in the top 5.
Okay, now if I'm being honest with myself here, I'd have to say Walter Payton is the best running back of all time. So I got Walter Payton number 1. Um, I got Barry number 2 because forget about football players, forget about professional athletes. I'm talking about everybody that lives in the world. Nobody can do what Barry Sanders does. There may be people in this world that never played basketball that could probably do things Michael Jordan can do. We don't know that. And other sports, there might be people that can hit a ball as far as Barry Bonds, that we don't know about.
Yeah.
There might, somebody could probably smoke Usain Bolt in a foot race that probably we won't know about. Nobody can do what Barry Sanders does. I don't care who you are. So he's number 2. Jim Brown, I always put at number 3. And I have him at number 3, and obviously I can only base it on like NFL films, like knowing what I know about him, my research on him over the years. I don't know that if I was like 70 or 80 years old, I might have had him at number 1. I don't know, because he was so good in the short time that he played. Yeah. I really don't know where I would have had him ranked. Probably would have been number 1 or number 2, but yeah, I have him at number 3.
I bet there's some old school guys that have him number 1.
I have Adrian Peterson, number 4. He challenged Dickerson's record one year. I don't remember what year it was, but he almost broke Eric Dickerson's record also, and he's also part of the 2,000-yard club.
Yep.
And number 5, I have Earl Campbell at number 5. And the way that I judged my number 5, and I don't have Bo Jackson because of the longevity. He didn't play long enough. That's the only reason I don't have Bo Jackson on my list.
Right.
Just didn't play long enough because he unfortunately had that hip injury against the Bengals. But Earl Campbell, that's the one guy I would rather line up against Bo Jackson than Earl Campbell. I just I don't want any part of Earl Campbell. I got to have him at number 5.
Whenever I think of Earl Campbell, I always think about that highlight of that game they showed with where his jersey's just shreds hanging off his shoulder pads.
Yeah, I think of that one, and I think of he's running, and he gets hit like at the half-yard line, and he's kind of doing this, and he's kind of like moonwalking back to the end zone. So I got Walter, Barry, Jim Brown, Peterson, and Earl Campbell at number 5.
Nice. Our top 3 is the same, and we both have AP on our list. Now, I will tell you that because like we did with another show, I pulled 3 creditable sources, and I pulled their top 5 rankings. And I will tell you, there's only 2 names. You had one guy that didn't show up on any list, and there's 2 guys, 3 because there's a tie on one list. 3 guys that we didn't mention that made some of these lists. So ESPN, their list, top 5 running backs, they have at number 5 a tie between Eric Dickerson and O.J. Simpson. They got Barry Sanders at number 4, Emmitt Smith at number 3, Walter Payton 2, Jim Brown 1. Bleacher Report has Adrian Peterson at number 5, Barry Sanders number 4, Jim Brown 3, Emmitt Smith 2, Walter Payton number 1. And then NBC Sports has Gale Sayers at number 5.
Good one.
Walter Payton at number 4, OJ number 3, Barry 2, Jim Brown number 1.
Pretty good.
Yeah, not bad list. Look, it's weird to look up these lists and see such a variety, and obviously it's all opinion based. I don't know how each source, what metrics they use, or it seems like some like maybe Bleacher Report that go strictly on stats. You know what I mean? Because the way they have it laid out, Walter Payton, Emmitt Smith, Jim Brown, Barry Sanders, Adrian Peterson, they're placing just by stats alone. But while stats are great, I don't think, in any list, there's got to be that X factor that you talk about also when it comes to stats about talent and the things that you've seen. And, like you said, Bo Jackson, if Bo Jackson doesn't get hurt,
right.
I think he's ending up on all of these lists somewhere near the top. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I have I have a 5 honorable mention names I'm gonna mention here. Hold on, let me write them down. Um, See, this is why I wrote them down because I already forgot 2 of them. Oh, okay. I got a few honorable mentions. Just basically, these are just shout outs.
Right.
I thought Marcus Allen was a hell of a running back with the Raiders and,
Yep.
and has some good seasons with the Chiefs. Obviously, Emmitt Smith was a great running back, not just because he won Super Bowls. I think he would have been a pretty damn good NFL running. I don't think he would have been better than Peyton or Barry, but I think anywhere he went, he would have been good. Curtis Martin, I thought, was a good running back for New England.
Yep.
And Terrell Davis was one hell of a quarterback also.
Yep. And I'll add to that and say Marshall Faulk.
Oh, yeah.
Marshall Faulk, probably one of the most dynamic running backs ever. He had equal amount of yards catching passes out of the backfield as he did, rushing.
Speaking of Marshall Faulk, I actually thought of him earlier today when you were talking about when you mentioned Barry had 4 300-yard rushing games in his junior year.
Yeah.
The only player that I could probably think of that maybe could have came close to that would have been Marshall Faulk at San Diego State.
Okay.
So we'll have to check his stats later on. I know he. I just remember watching him on ESPN, man, at San Diego State, and and even though he went there, and maybe that conference, the competition level wasn't that good. Obviously, he was a special player because he's in the NFL Hall of Fame. So
yeah,
I would guess that he probably maybe might have had 2 300-yard rushing games in college. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, what about Ron Dane? As far as like single season, isn't Ron Dane kind of like the closest as far as like performance at a for a collegiate running back?
Well, Dane was the all-time rushing leader when he graduated. He's not anymore. Matter of fact, it was a kid from San Diego State like 2 or 3 years ago. I can't remember his name. I can't remember his name.
Rashad Penny.
Well, San Diego State had 2 dynamite running backs. There was Penny and there was another guy. I can't remember his name, but the other guy is the guy that broke Ron Dane's rushing record.
But
I don't think Ron Dane had any 300-yard rushing games.
Okay.
And here's an interesting factoid about Ron Dane. Michigan's the only school in the Big Ten that he didn't have 100 yards against. His senior year, the year he broke the record and won the Heisman, he had 0 rush yards against us.
The defense.
Ron Dane. So
now a couple guys I want to just talk about quickly. A couple names that not really you don't think about these guys as far as all-time running backs and all-time greats, but freakish talent at the running back spot, kind of unorthodox. And I know one of them you might say, well, he was a fullback, but Christian Okoye and Mike Allstott.
Yeah.
These guys were super large human beings. They called Christian Okoye the Nigerian Nightmare. And you always think about that hit, meeting at near the goal line with Steve Atwater of the Broncos. But those two guys were just, I know Mike Allstott was technically a fullback, but they gave him the ball. He ran it like a running back. These guys were super big, super athletic. And, not Ron Dane. I got Ron Dane on the brain. Christian Okoye, he was the running back, but the dude was so big. These guys are so freakishly big, but could run like modern day running backs.
Yeah, the Chiefs, on top of the Nigerian Nightmare, Larry Johnson was a good running back, and Priest Holmes was a good running back. They've had solid running backs in the last 30 years.
Yeah, Jamal Charles played there for a while.
Yep.
Yep.
That's fun. That's a fun team, man. So
yeah,
man, that was a good Barry episode, man. You got anything else?
No, I spit out all the data I had in my brain and written down on the paper in front of me here. So
I will say one more thing about Barry. I'm a little shocked listening to those ESPN and all the other polls that like a lot of them had him 4th. That's a little shocking, I think. But
yeah, two of the lists had him at number 4. Yeah, it was surprising, way down there. Like I said, I think they look more at the stats because they have, you know, usually in the top three you find Walter Payton and Jim Brown, and then the couple of those lists, Emmitt Smith pops in above. I think just because of that, he hung around so long and went to Arizona and was just effective enough to creep up to that record.
Yeah. Yeah. My last thing on Barry, like I said, to this day, he's he's still the best college football player I've ever seen. Woodson's a close second, but if I'm being honest with myself, I've never seen anything like Barry Sanders. The only like as far as like standout seasons in college, the only players that I would put in that category, and this is just my personal opinion, would be Woodson, uh, the net at Penn State the last year he played there, Reggie Bush and Vince Young.
Yeah, yeah. Reggie Bush was probably, yeah, he was very electrifying at the running back. I compare more to a Desmond Howard type. He was a dual threat running back, punt returner, just like Desmond was wide receiver, punt returner. But I will say this, as far as the NFL, I have not yet until recently seen anybody with the physical skills and the athletic skills, that the way they move and cut and make people miss, until I watched Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson at the quarterback spot, the way he runs the ball, is, I'm not going to say it's Barry-esque. I haven't seen that kind of athleticism and movement and cutting like that until recently with Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I agree with all that. The only thing, and I'm not trying to jinx the kid because I never want to see anybody get injured. I think he's another elusive quarterback, young quarterback that we've seen like in the last 10 or 15 years. He's another guy that just ain't that kind of in the NFL with NFL speed. That's only going to last for so long. That doesn't. I mean, ask Mike Vick, Robert Griffin III, and there's been other running backs that have been like that. And I don't want him to get injured. I'm just saying that's
yeah. Well,
usually doesn't last long.
Yeah, without getting off on too much of another 30-minute conversation about it. Yeah, I think Mike Vick. You think about guys like Mike Vick and even Randall Cunningham. Mike Vick, I think Mike Vick could have done it long term if he hadn't got in trouble and went to jail and stuff like that. But yeah, I hope he's more like Mike Vick, where he could sustain it over a long period of time, and less like Robert Griffin, who, I think just because of coaching and overuse, he only lasted a few years at that level.
Yep. All right, Dan. Well, that's going to conclude the Barry Sanders show today.
All right.
That was a good. I thought that was an interesting topic today. Fun to talk about Barry. Talk about the old days.
Yeah, good conversation. Always good to talk about Barry. Like I said, one of the most electrifying players in NFL history. That's an exciting player to watch, and yeah, it was good to talk about him. So yeah, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you like what we're doing. Leave us some comments. Hit that like button. Turn on your alerts so you're notified when new episodes come out. And yeah, good conversation.
Good conversation, and we'll be back in a few days, 2, 3, or 4 days. I don't know the exact date yet, but I believe next time we will be baseball will be the subject. Whether we're talking about a team or a player, so we'll talk a little baseball now.
Making the call, okay? Talking about baseball, something baseball.
I'm just going in the order I had it on the sheet here. So we'll talk a little baseball next.
Okay.
Okay. Until happy Memorial Day weekend to everybody out there. I can't imagine all the partying that's going to be going on and everybody
locked down.
Yeah, I mean, the weather. Well, as far as up here, Dan, the weather is like very, very nice now. Like today, I think it got to like 75 and sunny, just a beautiful day.
Yeah.
And people have been stuck in their homes for a couple months, and now they're to the point where, hey, don't tell me what to do. I'll do what the hell I want to do. So people are going to be partying and drinking. That's why when that second wave comes in the fall, that's why they say it's going to be a lot worse second time around than this time. I hope I'm wrong, man, but just I hope everybody's, you know, at least if you don't care about safety, at least look out for other people. That's all I ask.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, I'm Ray Dawg Ascencio, Big Dan Hutchinson from Carrollton, Texas. And I'm all the way from Flint, Michigan, on the other side of the country, saying good night, and we'll see you this weekend sometime. Happy Memorial Day weekend.